All right, we are rolling. Hello, happy Friday. Welcome to another installment of Get a Clue in 52. This is the For Coaches edition, myself included. I'm Jeff Klubeck, your host for these weekly jams that we're doing every Friday. I want to say hello right away to Sue, coming all the way from down under, joining weekly as she does. It always gives me more energy to see somebody. Let's go on. I'm going to be here doing these every week, no matter what. But it's always great to see you, Stu, and the energy I get knowing that you're here. And let's get into it. So, Get a Clue in 52. By now, everybody might know that this is a tips book, and it's the third in a series of tips books. The first one we did had 52 tips in the 5 categories that were communication, marketing, networking, sales, and accountability. Then, with a client and friend, Vipul Dayal, we co-authored the second edition of Get a Clue in 52 last year. We read the tips every week. It was the entrepreneur edition. And the 5 categories in that edition were personal branding, business acumen, business ownership, leadership and influence, and then work-life balance. All 5 categories, all 52 tips related to being an entrepreneur. So that got me to this year, and I wanted to write this year's tips book. I'm going to do one every year, I think, for a while, about coaching and the profession of coaching, and not so much the industry of coaching or the personal and professional growth industry, but the profession, the practice, the endeavor to coach and to coach for either the leadership skills of coaching in our career, if we're intrapreneurial, or those of us that want to build a practice or maybe even a business in personal professional growth with coaching on our menu. This is for you, and it's for me too, because I'm doing all of those things, right? Even though I've been in the game 17, 18 years now as a world-class coach, been all over the world, I'm still learning, I'm still growing, I'm still being challenged every day, still knocking on new doors to access new levels, and it's great. So we're continuously growing. And so I mean it when I say that this is for coaches, myself included. Now, the 5 categories in this book, and by the way, welcome to Get a Clue in 52. 5 categories. The first category that we covered was about 11 tips in self-promotion. We become a coach, we identify as a coach, we embrace that, and then we start to let the world know that we coach, we can coach, we're coaching, coaching for sale, so to speak. We promote ourselves with those skills and with that acumen. Then we got into 9 tips on enrollment or engagement, right? It's one thing to let the world know that you're a coach. It's another thing to get to the point where people are going to hire you as a coach, or you're going to get permission to coach people, whether they're paying you out of their pocket or out of their personal and professional growth budget, or whether it's a function of your leadership as with your direct reports inside of an organization. You still want to get permission to lead. So we have these 9 tips on engagement, right? And specifically, we focus on how I structured 2 complimentary coaching sessions in order to enroll coaching clients and build my coaching practice. So there's a lot of focus there. And then, so after we self-promote and after we enroll coaching clients, now we got to coach. We actually have to deliver the coaching. So the 2 sections that are focused on delivering the coaching is motivation, which is the section that we're in right now. And then once we finish this section, we have 10 tips on motivation that we're covering right now. We're in the middle of it. Once we finish these, we're going to get to a set of 10 tips on accountability. And then finally, the book will wrap up with 12 tips on practice building, which is we're going to have a lot of fun with that. So it's we're building up to a lot of silliness and joviality that I'm going to be sharing those final 12 tips with you. But for now, let's get focused on what we're doing here inside of motivation. Let me get ready to read this week's tips. So when we got into motivation, we talked about outcomes, 6 general outcomes that we seek, that guide us, that are guiding principles for anytime we're trying to deliver motivational leadership inside of a coaching session or what have you. And then we went on to more specific tools in the toolbox. We talked about emotional tools. We talked about physical tools. And then especially this acronym of TEBED, get to bed so that you can rest more restoratively, more peacefully, right? What are our thoughts? What do we eat? What about our breathing, our exercise, our drinking? And then, of course, not just sleeping and laying down and closing our eyes, but resting deeply where the body restores itself and heals itself. We went into that. 2 weeks ago, we talked about, well, actually, no, not 2 weeks ago, last week, relationship tools. Sue, I'm still exhausted from reading all of those. It was like 6 pages and like one of the longer tips in the book. And it's an area that I'm very fortunate in my life. I have a lot of fantastic relationships. I'm very rich beyond my wildest imaginations with all of the loving relationships in my life. So I had a lot to say about relationships. We focused on partner, relationships, the attraction, the compatibility, and the communication that relationships need. And that broke down to a lot of different, dynamic content. And by contrast, today we're in tip number 25. It's not going to be as long, for one reason, I grew up with not a lot of education in this area. My parents, they loved each other, and I knew how to cuddle, and I knew how to sit on the couch and watch TV. There's a lot of things I learned from mom and dad, but they didn't have their stuff together financially. So I didn't know about financial planning, estate planning. I didn't know, about the power of compounding interest. I didn't know. There's so many things I didn't know that I've had to learn as an adult. And so this isn't an area of coaching where I've considered myself to be an expert, a master, rich and affluent like I am in relationships. Although I'm much better off in life than my parents were, that's for sure. We're doing well, right? We've got some investments, etc. But I've had to grow in this area myself. And what I really want to say before I get into reading the tip for coaches, emerging and aspiring coaches out there, is that when we consider the tools in our toolbox, when we consider the strategic information that we know of, that we can bring into coaching conversations, the goal is not for us to be the expert in any of these given areas. We need to know enough in order to get people willing to talk, get people willing to assess, get people willing to take action, get people willing to make a change. We don't have to be the financial advisor. We don't have to be the investment banker. We don't have to be the venture capitalist. We don't have to have that depthful level of expertise. We need to know enough. We need to know enough. And it's very funny how basic and remedial what we need to know is in order to help somebody with coaching conversations in this area. So when you talk about money, whether it's finances, which is the decisions that we make with the money that we earn, or whether it's income, how much are we earning? How much are we bringing in? So income is what's coming in. Finances is the decisions we make with what comes in, very generally speaking. It's fascinating to me how simple it can be to just know enough to get somebody talking. And that's what our job is as a coach. And what I want to say before I get into reading word for word, whether it's income, whether it's finances, money, however you break it down, is going to be in one of everybody's top three, for the most part. There are some people that are out there that are wildly affluent and money isn't one of their goals at all. Maybe it's legacy, it's charity, it's philanthropy, it's endowments, it's something that will live beyond them. But that's rarer, right? Most of us are still, until we're independently wealthy, money for our personal lives or money in our careers, the revenue for the business, right? Sales, revenue, bottom line, this is a very important topic. You're not going to have to go very far in your coaching career before you find somebody that wants to include money or finance or income in their top three goals that they're setting with you. So anyway, having said that, it's one of the usual suspects, I call it, because this is such a often identified area for growth, improvement, change, etc. But also, I got to let you know the fun part of this is that I don't have to have my series this and series that and my licenses, and I don't have to be a banker. I don't have to have any of that. Remember, we're not advising people. We're not telling people what to do. Right. I'd rather refer. I want to refer people to financial advisors. I got 3, 4, 5, 6 people behind me that I can refer people to, but they got to be ready to have that conversation. That's our job, is getting people ready to have the conversation, getting people willing to talk about the truth of their situation, get people willing to make a change, willing to talk to a professional. You don't refer somebody unless there's that readiness, that willingness. We need to know enough to get to that readiness, that willingness. Great. If you want to be a financial coach and go deeper and get all your licenses and get your certifications and get regulated to be able to be a fiduciary and all of that, fantastic. Let me know who you are. Maybe I'll include you in my referrals team. But what I'm trying to tell coaches is that you don't need any of that in order to make a difference for somebody's lives. What our goal is not to solve everything in somebody's financial lives. Our goal is to get somebody willing to solve it, get somebody willing to talk about it. All right, I think I've made that point. Here we go. If you're following at home, page 104 in Get a Clue in 52, this is tip number 25 overall, and it's the 5th tip in the motivation section. We're talking about financial tools. Here we go. Sue, I'm laughing at myself right now because I'm laughing at myself right now is the first thing, right? I always preview the tip with my thoughts on this, right? And then I start reading and I end up reading exactly what I just previewed because I'm so one with this material. But here we go in a fun, laughing sort of way. Happy Friday, everybody. Thanks for joining in. Here we go. I'm laughing right now, both for how long the previous tip was and even more so for how short, especially by comparison, this one will be. My favorite tool for coaching people on their finances is to refer them to a financial or wealth advisor, a fiduciary that is licensed, trained, and educated to help people. Perhaps you can say it with me, Bill. You can say it with me. This is funny. I'm not trying to make fun of financial advisors out there. Tip of the cap to Jason Surya, specifically with First Command Financial, who is the regional director in Southern California. And I helped him, I've been coaching him for over a decade to get to that position. But the story is when I met him at a networking group, he goes to introduce himself, Sue. He says, "Hello, my name's Jason Surya, and I'm with First Command Financial. And for some reaon I was in an ornery mood or whatever. And I said, let me guess, you help people build, protect, and redistribute their wealth." And he's like, "Oh yeah, I guess I can't do the cookie cut elevator pitch. I'm gonna have to bring it in this group. We got a wordsmith over here." And so his face went, because he couldn't believe that I just gave his pitch. And so here we go. A fiduciary that is licensed, trained, and educated to help people, perhaps, you could say it with me, build, protect, and redistribute their wealth. Okay. I'll make the tip a little bit longer by suggesting that we, as coaches, have more than one such professional we trust to recommend. I do everything I can to make sure I have no personal interest in who someone chooses for help with their finances. And the best way to do that is to introduce more than one person and be upfront that my client is shopping for an advisor. That's it. Okay, well, there's a little more. Many people do not believe they are ready to talk to a financial advisor. They don't feel their finances are in order enough to present them to someone to make sense of, or they are resistant to the unknown fees or expenses of hiring an advisor. Sometimes I do have to coach people on making progress that I don't need a license to discuss with them. Here's a brief summary. Budget. What's a 6-letter word that starts with B and ends with T? That's right, budget. Simply, I'm going to slow down here. Do you understand how simple this is? Simply asking a client if they have a budget can open up a month or more of coaching. Very simply, we take our income and subtract our expenses. I'm going to say that again. Very simply, we take our income and subtract our expenses. If what remains is positive, then we plan to save, invest, or enjoy, ideally in that order. If you're, delayed gratification guy like I am. If what remains is negative, we plan to reduce expenses and increase income. It seems basic or remedial, but the truth is that most people do not have or stick to any sort of budget. Want versus need. When helping clients reduce expenses, they need to learn to ask themselves the difference between a want and a need. Again, this seems basic and remedial, but the truth is that it requires a great deal of discipline to reduce expenses down to needs only. People believe they need things they do not, that they don't need, right? This has more to do with intervening in beliefs than actual X's and O's of managing finances. But we must ask questions like, can you make coffee at home? Or do you need to have Starbucks every day? Do you need all 400 channels, or will a basic package work? Speaking of Starbucks, I'm going to have my sip of iced coffee right here. All right, savings. The term reserves, when expressed as an amount of time, refers to how long a person can survive, cover all of their expenses without any additional income. If my expenses are $5,000 a month and I want 6 months worth of reserves, I will need at least $30,000 in the bank. Most people are living paycheck to paycheck or deal to deal, or worse yet, on credit. And reserves is a responsible thing to ask about when supporting clients in financial goal areas. Investments. An investment is something we can bring I think there's a typo there. An investment is something that could bring either a profit or loss. When clients are looking for investments to grow their wealth, there are a couple usual suspects worth considering. Number one, real estate. Buy, hold, or fix, flip. Shares in real estate investment trusts, note purchasing, private money lending, and so on. Airbnb the last 10 years has risen as a great way for people to make money, like it's quasi property management, buy and hold, long-term, short-term rentals, right? I'm actually in an Airbnb right now. We're doing a little family staycation here in San Diego, and somebody in the elevator said, "Oh, short-term rentals aren't legal in San Diego." Anyway, I don't know if I'm breaking the law, but the place was available and we got it. And so the whole family is here inside this very artsy kind of studio loft. near the baseball stadium. And we're all going to go to the baseball game tomorrow night. And we went bowling last night. A lot of fun. So just so you know out there, I have a family and we are enjoying ourselves right now. Special time of year before AJ goes off to college. But back to investments, real estate is one area. There's a lot of different ways to make money in real estate. And I'm happy to tell you that my parents, they had one house all their lives and they refinanced it over and over and over again every time they got into trouble. So they ended up owing like 6 times, 7 times more for it by the time they sold it than what they bought it for. Like, it's like ridiculous. And then they bought a place in Vegas, and as soon as they got there, they refinanced that, and that was it. They were living off refinancing and interest rates in that game. Breaking that kind of generational curse. I can tell you that my wife and I, we have our own owner occupied, and we have a portfolio of 6 doors, so 6 sets of tenants. So we're building our real estate portfolio, and we're in much better position. And that's what my parents wanted, for us to do better than they did. And we want our kids to do better than us. So I'm not disparaging mom and dad by celebrating the fact that this is one area that I have gone into in real estate. And we've made some good moves and done very well. And we're still continuing to grow. We've got a lot of room to go there. Next area here is small business or franchises. So there's another area that I've started. I own my own business. And at first, right, you get the tax breaks when you go into business for yourself. And then, like at first, Sue, all I need to do is make $50,000 a year to justify the money I paid to the state every year just to have a business that I could run expenses through and make some moves and on and on. But it got bigger than that, and then you have other factors to consider. But the point is, small businesses and franchise I'm going to go back to word for word reading. Established and capable of being bought or bought into. So, well, actually, yeah, small businesses or franchises. Let me say that again. I not starting your own business, but I'm talking about like laundromats and then car washes. Or one client of mine, they were doing multi-level marketing for a while. It was a husband and wife team, and they were, he was expecting her to do stuff she didn't want to do, and she was expecting him, and it was killing their marriage. And I said, well, through the coaching, I found out that they had owned a franchise before, and it was kind of going well, but they were afraid to do it again. And once we got them past the fear, found a good franchise, they invested in a t-shirt shop, right? So it was called Big Frog. And they found a location, they bought the franchise, they ran it. All they had to do is follow the instructions, right? The manual that's given to them, and they buy the franchise. They didn't have to reinvent the wheel or make things up. They had a beautiful division of labor. Her roles were set up. His roles were set up. They grew it to the #1 store in all of the country, in the United States, the #1 Big Frog, and they sold it a couple of years later, and now they're enjoying retirement, happy as can be. They even invited me to their son's wedding. Remember, did I tell you about this last week, Sue? We were talking about relationships. They're the ones, right? They had sessions left over after we saw them. Hey, can you meet with my son because he's got commitment issues? Anyway, very fun client to recall. But small businesses or franchises, right? Next, the stock market, annuities, retirement products. Again, see a licensed professional about these investments. We've got some stock, I own pieces of some companies here and there, but this is not an area where I can educate anybody, right? This is not a wheelhouse area for me. Start and grow a business. Entrepreneurs invest in themselves and get other people to invest in their ideas, concepts, etc. So that's what I meant when I started to get into investments. That's what I've done. Get a Klu, and now the Integrity Game, and the Get a Klu is set up as a C Corp, so it can have ownership over other organizations, and you start to learn about how to structure an entity and pass through tax savings, and whether you pay yourself or not, and getting on salary and doing company matches. There's all kinds of things that you can do when you start and grow a business, especially if you get payroll service, and you get really good advising from your tax professionals and so forth. Now, let me finish the word for word read. You can see that even though my preferred tool for financial coaching is to refer clients to licensed professionals, there are lots of conversations to be had on the way to getting the client ready to have that level of support if they don't already. What I really prefer is to only be working with people who are doing better than I am financially. It is a fringe benefit of my profession that I get to learn from all the successful people I have coached over the years. Just to name one person who I mentioned earlier today, Vipul Dayal, my client and friend who I've co-authored a Get a Klu in 52 with. I learn from him all the time. He's a hotelier. He's got multiple serial go-giving entrepreneur. So he's involved in, he has his own charity. He's got several businesses. His dad owns a bank. So talk about the moving parts in his world financially. It's always an education working with him, but I don't need to know as much as he knows financially in order to be effective as his coach. I just have to ask right questions about these principles. So there you have it. That's tip number 25 and Get a Clue in 52. When we are endeavoring to provide motivation for anyone in any area of their life, you need to have a combination of strategies and behavioral intervention. We either need to get people out of their own way if their beliefs are what's preventing them from moving forward, or we need to be able to have enough strategy under our belt, not to advise people. We don't need financial strategy in order to tell people what to do. We need financial strategy in order to know what to ask people. That's the key. Our job is not to tell people what to do. We're not giving financial advice. We are learning as much as we can about finances to be smart in the questions that we ask people, to get them willing to talk about their finances, willing to make commitments, willing to talk to the people that refer. And I think I'm repeating myself at this point. Sue, what say you about tip number 25, financial tools? And again, thanks for being here.
Pleasure. Good to be here. There's a couple of things that come to mind. Going back to the second paragraph on page 104, where you've got having more than one such professional we trust to recommend. Yeah. I think trust is a key word, particularly in this space of finances. We really want to be confident that when we are making referrals, suggestions for our clients to someone else, that we're really, really confident that we are sending them off to someone that's not going to do a disservice.
And even here's the caveat, right? Like, even if we have that trust, that still doesn't mean that everything's going to go right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's still, and it'll still come back to the individual in terms of how they work with the information and the teaching that gets given to them by that professional. Totally agree. But you, at least in the first instance, want that trust that you're sending them off to someone who's going to do the right thing.
Yeah. And the other point is, you never want just one. You want two or three, because if, like, it's not just the trust, to avoid anything going wrong comes back to you, but the confidence. Right? You want the person to have, if you're only referring one person to somebody that's having a hard time talking about their finances anyway, there's going to be fears, suspicions, doubts that you have to get through. But if you say, look, I've got these two people, interview both of them and tell me if either of them are going to be right for you. And if neither are, then I'll go right. Or here's 3 names and phone numbers. I'm going to let them all know that you're going to reach out and that you're shopping. So when you give somebody 3, now they aren't worried that you're referring somebody for a referral, for a favor, for a kickback, do you know what I mean? You have no, I don't care who you talk to, as long as you talk to somebody, is where we get to come from. Continue.
Yeah, but even on that, I think as a coach, what's the more that we do our job to get our client talking and understanding where their need is, from a finance perspective, the more detail, I guess, the more effective we can be in terms of our referral, because there won't necessarily be one. Right. Yes, we're talking about having options, but there won't be necessarily one person that is skilled in the particular area that they might want to focus on.
That's correct.
You might have someone that is more skilled in the area of real estate investment, more skilled in options, share trading, that sort of thing. So having that menu list almost of areas of focus that people have, that they're really good at their job, is incredibly invaluable as having that next stage once we get our clients talking about what resonates with them in terms of an area of focus. And I think too, there's some basic things that we can do, even if finances isn't our forte. And one that comes to mind for me that I've had a few people share is around the principles of profit first. And there's a book that is available. It's a very simple model, but quite powerful. And even that, having, you talk about having a toolkit.
Yeah.
That there are some simple things that we can at least have available as sort of that interim step.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mention this, but in addition to having individuals that we refer people to, again, this came up again either last week or the week before, but having books or movies to refer people to can be fantastic as well. Like Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a staple for reading. It's eye-opening in terms of how you look at money management. That's one that I had to read when I was going through my coach's training, right? So that's something that I've recommended to clients. So yeah, it's not just one advisor, but again, we constantly have to acquire information, and we constantly have to put ourselves in a position to gather these options to present to our clients, not because we're advising them. Again, I reemphasize this point. We're not telling people what to do. We want to get them to have the conversation. Yeah, that's the main thing. And so we need to know enough in order to do that. Now, here's another thing that comes about. Like, you hear this sometimes, right? And I believe this in many, 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 many areas. And this is the point I'm going to make. There's a saying out there that I've heard that says, never take advice from anyone who's not doing better than you are. Right. And so I would agree with that if, in fact, we're giving advice. Right. But don't let that commonly accepted quote or saying or cliche confuse us into thinking that we as coaches are trying to give advice. I can coach somebody. As a matter of fact, I probably, I want to say I only coach people that are doing better than I am. I want to say that. It's not true, but I want to say that. You follow? Because they're not hiring me, for my financial advice. They're not hiring me to make the amount of money that I make. They're hiring me for my coaching. Right? So you follow, like a real estate is a great example. One of my very good friends, and I wasn't even trying to get him as a client. We were just talking when he was breaking into the real estate game. He's like, Jeff, I know that you're a great coach, but I think I should coach with somebody that knows real estate. And I'm like, well, first of all, I'm not asking you to coach with me. We're friends. Like, you're making this up, right? Like, there's this thing in his head, like, oh, I'm a coach. I should get it. Or I'm a real estate agent. I'm a coach. I should get a coach. My best friend's a coach. How do I explain to my friend that I'm not going to use him? And I'm like, you don't have to explain anything. I shouldn't coach you anyway. We're too close to each other. We've got too many years of history to me. I could coach him. You have to compartmentalize. It wouldn't be ideal anyway. But my point is that he was saying, his reason in his head to excuse himself from a story he was making up in the first place was that I didn't coach in real estate. It never. I'm like, first of all, I own properties and you don't. I had my real estate license. I had my broker's license, and I have coached, dozens of real estate agents, financial advisors, mortgage brokers, etc. Never mind all of that, right? I've already forgotten more about real estate than you've ever learned. Forget that. But the truth is what he didn't understand, and I didn't bother to explain it to him because he'd already had the story and the answer and the result in his head. So whatever. I'm like, I just spent more time convincing him, like, hey man, we're friends. I don't need to be your coach. I got plenty of clients. Yeah. But what he didn't understand is coaching is what people get coaches for. How do I get people engaged? How do I get people motivated? How do I hold people accountable? How do I ask questions? How do I get people willing to talk about things? How within my conversations of coaching do I find out who needs to get referred to, and on and on and on. So those are those other things. So just, aspiring and emerging coaches out there, don't shoot yourself in the foot, in an area of coaching, because, like, I coached people in health, even if I was, 20 pounds overweight, right? I coach people in finances, even if, I'm, worried about my balance in my bank. I've coached people in, relationships, even if I had an argument with my wife last night. You follow? So we don't have to be perfect in our life in any of these areas. What we really want to do is be world-class in the mechanics and the strategies and the tactics of coaching, What are the pillars of coaching? Engagement, motivation, accountability. What's the anatomy of a coaching session? Check-ins, reporting, new results, check out. These structures, these dialogues, these techniques, this appreciative inquiry, enough strategy in our toolbox that we can be smart at the cocktail party or ask good questions inside of a session, right? I don't have to be an expert in any of these areas in order to be a world-class coach in all of them. Yeah. What I need to do is focus on how good the coaching is. And that's what people don't understand a lot. So not only it's hard enough for clients to understand that. And the other thing too, by the way, if those of you are out there thinking about hiring a coach, it's like, oh, I only want to hire a coach that's kicking ass in real estate. Well, guess what? If somebody's making $1 million a year in real estate, they're going to keep making $1 million a year in real estate. They're not going to come down and make $100,000 a year in coaching. you follow, right? So, people are like, well, if they're doing that, they're not coaching. Yeah. They're doing that. Yeah. So it's helpful for the coaches to understand what our profession is, what our value is, what people are really paying for when they hire us. It's the structured conversations that get people willing to take action on the areas of their life they want change. And sometimes we have the strategy that'll work and we can set them up with it. But even when we have the exact strategy that they need to, I still recommend never telling anybody what to do. You lay the strategy on the table, you shine light on it, and you help them see what the obvious choice is. And when they commit, you ask them for permission to hold them accountable in the next session. Those are the dynamics that that are really what people are paying for. And I don't know if they realize it, but I'm here to promote the profession. And for clients that are considering getting coaches, you don't want somebody that's doing better than you in the area that you want the coaching. You want the best coach that's going to get the best out of you. And it could be a combination. I always wonder, I always wonder about the coaches that are like financial coaches. Why are you coaching now? If you're making all this money, why are you coaching? You know what I'm saying? And maybe they're not. They're doing seminars. And so they're doing the event and the seminar game, which isn't really coaching. Does this make sense? Right. So it's an interesting conversation. And it comes up around financial tools because, again, I came into this. I remember when I was learning how to coach, like, who am I to coach anybody on finances when I'm worried about, the first of the month having enough money? I remember there was tough times when I was learning how to coach. 2007, 8, 9, we were going through the worst economy since the Great Depression. And so in those years when people were losing their houses and foreclosures everywhere and really tough times before, Obama got elected, I was convincing people to pay me money out of their pocket to talk to me once a week. It's like fascinating, right? But I remember the tail between my legs feeling that I had, like, who am I? Who am I to coach anybody? What if they want to talk about finances? What am I going to do? And it didn't take long for me to figure out, like, oh my God, it's very easy for me to get, a partner in a relationship to commit to having a conversation about budget with their spouse. Next thing, 2 weeks later, next thing I know, I'm getting an email with a spreadsheet with a budget. You're like, oh my God, this is better than my budget, So you know what I'm saying? But I didn't need to have a budget, or I didn't need to send in the spreadsheet. You know what I'm saying? And say, hey, here's the spreadsheet. Here's my budget. Do what I do. I just had to get him willing to have a conversation with his wife. Yeah. And then the floodgates opened up. So I hope that point is coming through what we are as coaches, right? And we need to know enough.
Yeah, I think it is. It's definitely pulling it back to making the focus of making sure we're a world-class coach.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're doing here. Get a Clue at 52 for aspiring and emerging coaches, myself included. I absolutely hesitate not. I do not hesitate when I call myself a world-class coach, but still, I want to be like universe class. I got places to go. I got more to learn. I'm still growing. So let's go ahead and do a last call for comments and questions on this tip number 25 overall, financial tools. Get a Clue in 52. We're right in the middle in the section on motivation. We're right at the middle of the year. Next week is tip number 26. That's the half of 52. So last call for comments, questions, jokes, stories, anecdotes.
It's an interesting tip because I think it's the key thing is what you're highlighting. Don't get caught up in, are you the expert in finances? Focus on delivering awesome coaching and getting that happening. Yeah.
Ask the questions, have the deliverables team, and keep on studying, learn things, strive to improve your own financial condition, have some experience of endeavoring to improve your own finances, but without leaning on that as advice that you're going to give to somebody else, right? Demonstrate that you work on this and that you're better off than you were before. right? On and on. All of those things apply. Sue, thank you so much for being here. Every week, of course, I'm grateful. And unless there's anything else today, I'm ready to wrap it up and get back to my little family staycation. I think there's only one other thing on my calendar today, and then it's all focus on family time. So thank you for being here, Sue. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah, go and enjoy, celebrate.
All right. Thank you. Mwah. All right. We'll see you soon. Later.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.